Hi everyone, Mac Pierre-Louis here, attorney at law and mediator from Houston, Texas. And I'm also co-founder at instantmediations.com. And with me today is my colleague,
Natalia Ołowska-Czajka, advocate and mediator from Warsaw, Poland, and a co-founder of instantmediations.com as well.
Yes, and today we have a guest with us, and that's Daniel Rainey. And Dan is gracious enough to spend a few minutes with us for us to interview him and talk to him about his work, and particularly about online mediations, the field of credentials in online mediations, and how to become an effective mediator as in this new age of virtual mediations. So Dan, why don't you open us up and tell us about yourself?
Sure. Well, first I'd say I'm not a co-founder of instantmediation.com, so that leaves me out there. But yeah, I started working in using technology to integrate into dispute resolution systems generally back in the 1980s and 1990s, and really focusing more toward the middle and end of the 1990s and integrating technology into negotiation, mediation, basically large-scale multi-party disputes, that sort of thing. So I've been doing technology integration for quite a long time. I spent a number of years at the National Mediation Board here in the U.S. We handle all of the dispute resolution for the airlines and railroads in the U.S. And the last few years I was there, I was the chief of staff there. In between all of that, I had a consulting firm, which I've now started working in again, and doing a lot of training and a lot of writing and working generally in the field of online dispute resolution, mostly in mediation, but also in some peace building and other things as well.
Great. And so when it comes to ODR, or online dispute resolution, what's been your experience in ODR and in mediation in particular, and in mediation training as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would say that my definition of online dispute resolution is a broad one. There are some, especially those who are in the e-commerce world and the e-courts world, who have a more narrow definition of online dispute resolution. They talk about it as technology controlling, being an active fourth party. So you're really talking more about the use of algorithms, the use of artificial intelligence, and operating within a formal system. My definition of online dispute resolution traditionally has been broader than that. It's basically been just the intelligent application of technology to any of the functions that we have to fulfill as third parties, as mediators. And that can be all online, it can be mixed with face-to-face. There's a variety of things that you can do, but as long as you're using information and communication technology to actually perform the functions that you need to do as a third party, I consider that to be within the realm of online dispute resolution. I've done a good bit of training. I've taught at a number of major universities, law schools, actually interesting variety, law schools, business schools, counseling programs, graduate programs mostly. And I've also done training, industrial training, for clients in private industry and also the federal government. And so I've had quite a lot of experience adapting the idea of using technology in dispute resolution to a number of different venues.
Mm-hmm. So more specifically about trainings, do you personally train like one-on-one individual mediators, or is it more of a larger audience?
I've never really done any coaching. I'm not really, I don't do one-on-one coaching. What I've done generally has been groups of people. And one of the reasons for that, one of the reasons I like to do that, is that I think good training in any of the dispute resolution fields, but especially if you're talking about online dispute resolution, has got to include some experiential work. I want you to do a mediation using video. I want you to do one using audio. I want you to do one using text, because the only way you're really going to know how that works and how that feels is to actually put your hands on it, to actually do it. So what I like to do with the training that we set up is bring in enough people that we can gather groups together so that everybody has a chance to experience what it's like to engage in that environment. And you really can't do that with one-on-one coaching. You have to have enough people so that you can actually have groups working together.
Thank you. Okay, so what difference one more thing. What difference do you see between in-person mediations and online mediations?
There are a lot. It is tempting to think of video mediation as being pretty much like face-to-face mediation, and I think that's a big mistake. Basically, the way I try to approach it with the work that I do is I come from a communication background, communication theory background. And so what I try to do is say, okay, let's look at a basic communication model and what happens when human beings try to talk to one another. What are the elements that are there, the filters that are there that control what I say and how I interpret what I hear? What are the channels that I use? What's the channel capacity of verbal, nonverbal, and environmental? And so face-to-face, those are all things that we sort of take for granted, because if I invite you into my office, two parties to mediate into my office, I don't have to teach you how to talk. I may have to teach you how to talk to one another in a civil way, but I don't have to teach you how to talk. But if I'm operating in a video environment or an audio environment or a text environment, I probably do have to teach you how to talk a little bit, and I probably have to change the way I behave. So for me, the big thing about online dispute resolution as a mediator particularly is every time I move away from a face-to-face environment, I'm stripping away some channel capacity. In video, I'm losing a little bit of my nonverbal. In audio, I'm losing a lot of nonverbal, and especially the visual nonverbal cues. And when I talk about text, I'm losing almost all of the nonverbal except what people will infer from the way I phrase my messages. So I think the most important thing about training is to consider, how do I compensate for those things that I'm losing in terms of channel capacity as I go into these online environments.
So how the education in online mediation differs from the physical one then?
Well, there's a lot of similarity, because I think good face-to-face training and training for mediators who are going to work face-to-face involves bringing them together. I think you have to address certain things. You have to talk about ethics and standards of practice. I think you have to talk about how you operate within whatever legal or regulatory environment that you're in. And I think you have to talk about the stages of mediation that you have to go through. So if I'm working with you in a face-to-face environment, I have to talk about all of that. I think all of that I still have to talk about if I'm operating in an online environment. But in addition to that, I need to look at what changes or what adaptations I have to make in order to maintain those standards of practice in an online environment. And I think there are two or three that get more are more effective than others. I'll put it that way. I think if we talk about self-determination, self-determination in an online environment is different in the sense that I need to be able to explain to you the environment we're going to operate in, the technology we're going to use, in a way that is honest, but is also understandable to you, so that you can voluntarily enter that environment with me. And that's slightly different from what I have to do if I'm operating face-to-face. I think the idea of confidentiality, data security, is quite different. And so I have to understand that as a third party, but I also need to be able to tell you about it so that you can, again, come into that environment and be comfortable there. So there are some specific things that I would teach you in a face-to-face environment that I will, so to speak, add on to if I'm teaching you in an online environment.
Mm-hmm. So what skills should the online mediator possess?
Well, I think, first of all, I think online mediators should understand that it is more work, and there's no way around that, really. The preparation that you need to do, the preparing of the parties that you need to do, and the things that you need to understand really make it a little bit more work if you're going to do it well. Part of that is really understanding the technology, taking the time to choose the technology that you use intelligently and fitting it to the circumstance, learning it well enough so that you can talk to your parties about it intelligently, and then working with them in that environment. So that's different. Another thing that's different, I think, is that if I'm operating in a face-to-face environment, many of the things that I do vocally and non-verbally are almost second nature. I'm constantly looking at the entire environment and getting feedback into my own filters, and I can help control that conversation with a look or with a gesture much more easily than I can online. If I'm online, I have to vocalize some of the things that I do when I'm operating face-to-face. And so I have to use your name and say, okay, it's your turn to talk. It'll be your turn in a moment. Or, can I ask you, do you understand, or do you agree with what we're talking about? Or, this is what I heard. Did I get that right? And so I have to do a lot more sort of intervening to do reality checks and summarizing. And so there are some skills like that that I think you have to learn that are a little bit different than the ones that you use when you're operating face-to-face.
So bearing in mind the fact that you identify so many different factors in online mediation, do you think there is a need to certify online mediators? If yes, why?
Well, I'm going to give you a qualified yes. I believe if you, again, look at the standards of practice that are out there for mediators that are generally accepted. And one of the standards that we operate with is competence, right? You're supposed to at least make an effort to be a competent mediator if you hold yourself out as a third party. Well, I think certification is one way to look at that. And the reason I hesitate is that certification is a very slippery slope. Certified by whom, to do what, how are you judged? I mean, so there are all sorts of questions about what certification means. What I do think is that if I were, well, I do give advice. I'm giving advice to third parties who are working online. What I tell them is look for training that addresses the basic needs, the basic differences between online and face-to-face. Go through that training so that you're exposed to all of the environments you operate in, so you're exposed to the ethics that are there, so you're exposed to the standards of practice that are there. Go through all of that, and that will allow you to present yourself to the parties honestly as someone who has made an effort to educate him or herself about how to operate in this environment. So is that certification? Well, it can be certification. There are a number of groups that have established certification, I won't say certification standards, they've established standards of practice. And the International Mediation Institute, the Singapore International Mediation Institute, the American Bar Association, the Association for Conflict Resolution, the American Arbitration Association, all of these groups have said, if you're going to be competent, these are the things you need to know. And so I would say to third parties, look for a training program that addresses those, that can say to you, this training was created and delivered in a way that is consistent with the standards of practice for this industry. Take that training and then be able to present yourself as someone who's made an effort to be competent. And I know that's a slippery answer because there aren't really that many. There are people out there who are saying, okay, you take my training, you're certified. And sometimes all that means is I taught you how to push the buttons on Zoom. And I don't think that's enough. I think in order for certification to mean something, it has to actually address the basic standards of practice for the industry. If it doesn't do that, then I don't think it's worth the certification.
Got it. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate your time and all the wisdom that you've given to us just for the last few minutes. I've learned a lot. All right, so we look forward to working with you in the future. And
Sure.
Good luck in all your endeavors on the work that you're doing, because it's very closely aligned to what we're trying to do with instantmediations.com.
Terrific.
Thank
It was
you
great
so
to be with
much.
you. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.